You know that feeling when you finally finish something, a task, a project, even a small thing you've been putting off. And for a moment, there's relief, but it doesn't stay. It's replaced almost immediately by a quiet question in the background. What's next? And if there isn't a next thing, something feels off. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just a subtle sense that you're wasting time, even when you're technically resting. There's a certain kind of person who gets described as driven, disciplined, and reliable, the one people trust to get things done. But underneath that, there's often a kind of pressure that isn't visible from the outside. A pressure to keep proving something, to keep moving, to not fall behind some invisible line. And when that pressure shows up, people tend to label it in simple ways. Workaholic. Too serious. Can't relax. As if it's just a personality flaw. But it isn't that simple. It's not a flaw. It's a pattern. This shows up very strongly in people who fall into a very specific generational window, often called Xennials, the ones who grew up in the transition between analog and digital worlds, old enough to remember stability as an expectation, and young enough to experience how quickly that expectation disappeared. And one of the patterns that quietly formed in that environment is the tendency to tie self-worth directly to productivity, not just valuing productivity, but needing it to feel okay. And there's more going on here than most people realize. From a psychological perspective, this pattern is deeply connected to how the brain learns safety and value. The brain doesn't just track what you do, it tracks what gets rewarded. And during the developmental years of many Xennials, there was a strong reinforcement loop around achievement. Good grades meant approval, hard work meant security, stability was something you had to earn and maintain. At the same time, the broader environment was shifting. Economic uncertainty, changing job markets, the early signals that nothing stays guaranteed for long. When the brain experiences both of these together, reward for productivity and uncertainty in the environment, it starts forming a very specific association. If I keep producing, I stay safe. Neuroscience research on reward systems shows that when effort and validation are consistently linked, dopamine begins to attach not just to outcomes, but to the act of being productive itself, which means productivity stops being just something you do and starts becoming something you rely on to regulate how you feel about yourself. Over time, this becomes less of a conscious choice and more of a baseline state. It's not that you wake up thinking, my worth equals my output. It's that your nervous system has learned to feel more settled, more stable, more okay when you're doing something that looks like progress, and more restless when you're not. This is why even rest can feel slightly uncomfortable. Not because rest is wrong, but because at some point, doing became the way your system learned to stay regulated. And none of this is about being better or worse than anyone else. Some people are wired to find safety in connection, some in creativity, some in slowing down. This is just one pattern among many. It doesn't make someone more disciplined or more lost. It just means their nervous system learned a different route to stability. What makes this pattern complex is that it carries both a strength and a quiet cost. The strength is obvious: consistency, resilience, the ability to keep going when things are uncertain, the ability to build, to adapt, to not freeze when life shifts. But the cost is more subtle. Because when your sense of enough is tied to what you produce, enough becomes a moving target. There's always another level, another goal, another version of yourself that feels just slightly out of reach. And even when you arrive somewhere meaningful, your system doesn't fully register it. It just recalibrates and keeps going. So the experience many people in this pattern have is this strange combination of movement without arrival, progress without a lasting sense of completion, not because they're doing something wrong, but because their system was trained to keep scanning for the next step. And if you recognize yourself in this, there's nothing broken about it. It makes sense. Your brain adapted to the environment it was given. It found a way to create stability in a world that didn't always feel stable. That adaptation has carried you forward in ways that matter, even if it sometimes feels like it never quite lets you stop. There's a quieter layer to this that most people don't notice. The same pattern that makes it hard to feel enough is also the reason you've been able to build things others couldn't. To keep showing up, to keep moving through uncertainty, it's not just pressure, it's also capacity. And understanding that doesn't immediately change the pattern, but it changes how you see yourself inside it. Not as someone who can't relax, not as someone who's doing life wrong, but as someone whose system learned to survive by moving forward. And once you start seeing it that way, there's a different kind of question that begins to form. Not, how do I stop being this way, but what else is true about me that I haven't fully seen yet? If you found this video interesting and for more psychology, human behavior, and the kind of honest truths about the patterns we follow that nobody speaks about, subscribe to our channel. And before you go, drop a comment below about your experiences and thoughts.